Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the table. It wasn't a restricted number. I looked at Arthur, then answered and put it on speaker. Mrs. Walker, a voice said. It wasn't Marcus. It wasn't the lawyer. It was a voice that sounded like silk and ice, calm, professional, and terrifying. We noticed a disturbance at the estate tonight. We also noticed that Mr. Marcus Miller did not complete his delivery. We believe you are in possession of a small black item. A key. Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Arthur's jaw tightened. Who is this? I asked, my voice as firm as I could make it. We are the people who ensure that Project Sunset remains in the sunset, the voice replied. You have two choices, Eleanor. You can leave the key in the mailbox of the cottage by dawn, and we will consider the Vance debt settled. Or you can try to be a hero, and we will ensure that the eviction notice your daughter signed is the least of your worries. We have people inside the precinct. Marcus won't talk. Neither should you. The line went dead. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't a silence of secrets. It was a silence of war. We weren't just fighting a greedy son-in-law anymore. We were fighting the fixers, the dark machinery that protected the 1%. They're coming for it, Chloe whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Mom, we have to give it to them. It's just a key. Let them have their dirty money. I looked at Chloe, then at the key. Then I looked at the portrait of Henry on the wall. Henry never backed down. He never let a bully win. No, I said, this savage grandma in me rising back to the surface. If we give them the key, they'll kill us anyway to make sure we don't talk. These people don't leave witnesses. They only leave victims. So, what do we do? Arthur asked. I picked up the key.
We don't give it to them.
And we don't give it to the police. We do something they never expected. We're going to open that vault ourselves.
If we're going down, we're taking the whole Project Sunset with us. I turned to Chloe. Honey, you wanted to be a main character? Well, get your coat. We're going to the city. We have a vault to crack and a family to save. As we walked out into the night, I looked back at the house. It was just a building. But the secrets inside, those were the real inheritance. And I was going to make sure that by tomorrow morning, the world knew exactly who the old woman really was.
The drive to the city felt like a journey into the heart of a storm. Arthur sat behind the wheel of his black SUV, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Chloe sat in the back, clutching her father's old iron box as if it were a shield. And I sat in the passenger seat, the mysterious black key burning a hole in my pocket. We were 3 generations of a broken family, finally united by a secret that was never meant to see the light of day. The building is called the Obsidian Tower, Arthur explained, his voice low. It's a private vaulting facility. No names, no digital records. My father used it to store things the government and the public should never see. If Project Sunset is real, it's behind one of those doors. As we pulled into the underground parking of the tower, the atmosphere shifted. This wasn't a normal bank. There were no tellers, only security guards in tactical gear and biometric scanners at every entrance. Arthur led us to a private elevator. He used his thumbprint, a print that still carried the weight of the Vance legacy, and the elevator descended deep into the earth. When the doors opened, we were in a corridor of cold gray steel. The silence was absolute. Section 7, Vault 402, I whispered, reading the small engraving on the key. We found the door. It was massive, made of reinforced titanium. Beside it was a dual authentication panel. Arthur placed his hand on the scanner, and I inserted the black key. For a moment nothing happened. Then with a deep hydraulic hiss that sounded like a dying breath, the vault door swung open. The room inside was small and sparsely furnished. There were no piles of gold or stacks of cash. Instead, there were rows of leather-bound ledgers and a single high-tech computer terminal sitting on a desk. Chloe stepped inside, her breath catching. This is it? Just books. Arthur walked to the desk and opened the first ledger. As he scanned the pages, his face turned a ghostly shade of gray. These aren't just books, Chloe. These are the receipts of every bribe my father's company paid over 30 years. Politicians, judges, CEOs. even some people at the very top of the FBI. Project Sunset was a blackmail operation. My father didn't just have money, he had everyone's dirt. And Marcus found out, I realized. He didn't want the money. He wanted to be the new kingmaker. He wanted to use these ledgers to control the city. Suddenly, the screen on the terminal flickered to life. A countdown began. System alert. Unauthorized access detected. Data purge in 5 minutes. The fixers, Arthur shouted. They're wiping the servers remotely. If that countdown hits 0, all the evidence of their crimes disappears forever. Chloe dropped the iron box and ran to the terminal. I might not be a tech bro like Marcus, but I spent 4 years in marketing analytics. I know how to pull data before a crash. Mom, Arthur, find the ledger with the Cayman markings. I need the account numbers to verify the transfer. I scrambled through the shelves, my old hands moving faster than they had in years. I found it. A dark blue ledger with a golden sun embossed on the cover. Here. Section 9, page 104. As Chloe's fingers flew across the keyboard, the heavy steel doors of the vault began to slide shut. They're locking us in, Arthur yelled, throwing his shoulder against the door to slow it down. Chloe, hurry. I've got it. Chloe screamed. I'm not just pulling the data. I'm live streaming it to every major news outlet in the country. If we're going down, the whole world is watching. The countdown hit 0:10. The vault door was inches from closing. Arthur was struggling to keep it open, his face strained with effort. I grabbed Chloe's arm. We have to go. Now. Just one more second. Chloe hit the enter key with a triumphant shout. Upload complete. We dove through the closing gap just as the titanium doors slammed shut with a bone-shattering thud. We were back in the gray corridor, breathless and shaking. Arthur looked at his phone. His face lit up. It worked. My God, it's everywhere. The Vance name is being dragged through the mud, but every single fixer and corrupt official is being exposed right now. But the victory was short-lived. At the end of the corridor, the elevator doors opened. 5 men in dark suits stepped out. They weren't carrying briefcases. They were carrying silenced pistols. The fixers had arrived to finish what the data purge couldn't. I looked at Arthur and Chloe. We were trapped in a steel hallway with no way out. But then I felt something in my pocket. The second item I had taken from the iron box that I hadn't shown anyone yet. A small silver remote with a single red button. Wait, I said, a savage smile spreading across my face. Henry didn't just leave me secrets. He was an engineer. He built this vault security system for Arthur's father. I held up the remote. You boys want to see what happens when an old woman gets tired of being pushed around? The shadow in the pantry. The sirens were wailing in the distance, but inside the cold, dark kitchen of the Vance estate, the silence was even more terrifying. After guiding Chloe and Arthur to the safety of the car, a cold realization had hit me like a physical blow. The blue ledger, the only physical proof of the dark money and the Project Sunset payoffs, was missing. It must have slipped from my coat pocket during the scuffle in the basement. I have to go back, I told Chloe, my voice trembling but firm. Without that ledger, Marcus's lawyers will tear our story apart. It's the only way to make sure they stay behind bars forever. Chloe grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with terror. No, Mom. It's a trap. The house is crawling with those fixers. Please just stay in the car. But I couldn't. I had spent 30 years living in the shadows of a lie. I wasn't going to let the truth be burned away now. I slipped out of the car and moved like a ghost back toward the kitchen entrance. The power was out, and the only light came from the occasional flash of lightning. I entered the kitchen, the air smelling of expensive spices and something much more sinister, gasoline. I clicked on my small flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. I scanned the floor for the blue leather cover, but my light caught something else instead. A trail of fresh, dark droplets on the marble floor, leading straight toward the walk-in pantry. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I slowly reached for my phone and dialed 911, but I didn't hit send yet. I needed to see what was behind that door. With a shaking hand, I pushed the pantry door open. There, slumped against the shelves of vintage wine, was Stephen, the lawyer. He was gagged with duct tape, his eyes wide with a frantic plea for help. But he wasn't alone. Marcus was standing over him. his face illuminated by the flicking flame of a silver lighter. He was holding a large red canister drenching the pantry, and the lawyer in fuel. "Did you think you won, Eleanor?" Marcus's voice rasped from the shadows. He didn't even turn around. He knew I was there. If I can't have the Vance legacy, then no one will. By the time the fire department gets here, this house will be an ash heap. And the story? Old woman burns down daughter's house in a fit of senile jealousy. It's a perfect ending, don't you think? I didn't hesitate. I pressed the green send button on my phone. The operator's voice chirped in my ear. 911, what is your emergency? My name is Eleanor Walker. I shouted, holding the phone high so the operator, and Marcus, could hear me. I am in the kitchen of the Vance estate. There is a murderer here about to set the house on fire. Send everyone. Now. Marcus let out a guttural roar and lunged at me, the lighter still flickering in his hand. Hang up that phone. I didn't have a weapon, but I had 40 years of experience in a kitchen. I reached for the heavy cast iron skillet sitting on the counter, the same one I had used to cook the Thanksgiving meal, and swung it with every ounce of strength I had left. The heavy metal connected with Marcus's shoulder with a sickening thud, sending him crashing into the shelves. The lighter flew from his hand, rolling across the gasoline-soaked floor. Time seemed to slow down as the flame danced inches away from a puddle of fuel. I dove for the lighter, my fingers brushing the cold metal just as it went out. "You're done, Marcus," I panted, standing over him as the blue and red lights finally began to flood through the kitchen windows. "The police are in the driveway. Chloe is safe. And your Project Sunset just went viral." I reached into the corner behind the flour sacks and found it. The blue ledger safe and dry. I tucked it into my apron and looked at my son-in-law one last time. "You called me an old woman as an insult. But you forgot. Old women are the ones who know where all the secrets are buried." As the officers burst through the door, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a queen. I walked out of that smoke-filled kitchen, the ledger in my hand and my head held high. But as I passed the hallway mirror, I saw something that made me stop. A small black envelope was tucked into the back of the blue ledger. It wasn't part of the evidence. It was addressed to me in Henry's handwriting. "Eleanor, if you are reading this, the box wasn't enough. Go to the clock in the foyer. The pendulum holds the key to the second house." The second house? Henry never mentioned a second house. The rain had turned into a thick, clinging mist by the time we reached the edge of the county. Arthur was driving in a daze, his mind reeling from the destruction of his family's reputation, while Chloe sat in the back, clutching the blue ledger like a holy relic. I sat in the passenger seat, my fingers tracing the jagged edges of the silver key I had found hidden behind the pendulum of the grandfather clock in the foyer. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling. Henry was a simple clockmaker. Why would he have a second house? And why keep it a secret for 40 years? "Henry was never simple, Chloe," I whispered, looking out at the darkened trees. "He was a man who built cages for time. I think he built this place as a cage for the truth." The GPS led us down a forgotten dirt track, miles away from the glitz and glamour of the Vance estate. Finally, the headlights caught the silhouette of a small stone cottage nestled deep within a valley. It looked abandoned, its windows like empty eye sockets staring into the night. But as I stepped out of the car, I didn't feel fear. I felt a strange humming familiarity. I walked up to the heavy oak door and inserted the silver key. It turned with a smooth, silent precision, a trademark of Henry's craftsmanship. As the door swung open, the smell of cedar and old paper drifted out. But there was something else, the faint rhythmic tick-tock of 1,000 hearts. We stepped inside and Arthur gasped. Every inch of the walls was covered in clocks. Not the grand, ornate ones Henry sold in the city, but strange, complex machines with gears exposed and shimmering with silver and gold. In the center of the room sat a desk, and on that desk was a photograph of me, not as the old woman the world saw today, but as the young girl Arthur had loved. "He knew," Arthur said, his voice cracking. "He didn't just take you in, Eleanor. He watched over the memory of us." But Chloe wasn't looking at the clocks. She was looking at a large map pinned to the back wall. It was a map of the Vance estate, but it was covered in red ink. Lines were drawn from the estate to various points across the country, banks, warehouses, and private residences. Mom, look at the dates, Chloe said, pointing to the bottom of the map. These dates start the day I was born and end the day Henry died. He wasn't just a clockmaker. He was tracking Project Sunset for 40 years. He was an investigator. I walked over to the desk and opened the top drawer. Inside was a leather journal. I opened it to the final entry, dated just a week before Henry's heart gave out. The lion is at the door, it read. Marcus Miller has found the trail. He thinks he is hunting the Vance fortune, but he doesn't realize he is hunting a ghost. I have moved the original sins to the safe under the floorboards of the second house. Eleanor, if you are reading this, the blue ledger was the bait. This house is the trap. If the fixers come here, use the lever on the mantel. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked behind us. We spun around, expecting to see a ghost, but it was much worse. Standing in the doorway, drenched in rain and bleeding from a gash on his forehead, was Stephen, the lawyer. He had somehow escaped the police at the estate. He held a silenced pistol, and his eyes were wild with a frantic, suicidal light. The blue ledger was a decoy? Stephen screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. I ruined my life for a book of old receipts? Give me the original sins. Eleanor. Give me the real evidence or I swear I'll end this right now. You're late, Stephen, I said, stepping in front of Chloe. The police are already searching for you. There is nowhere left to run. I don't need to run, he shrieked. I just need one leverage piece to trade for my life. Give me the safe. I looked at the mantelpiece, remembering Henry's words. My hand slowly reached for the small, carved wooden lever shaped like a bird. Henry always told me that time catches up to everyone, Stephen, I said softly. For you, time just ran out. I pulled the lever. Instead of a trapdoor or a weapon, the entire wall of clocks began to chime at once. The sound was deafening, a cacophony of bells and gongs that vibrated through the very bones of the house. Stephen clutched his ears, dropping the gun in agony as the high-frequency vibrations shattered the glass of the clock faces. In the confusion, Arthur tackled Stephen to the ground, pinning him as the heavy stone walls of the cottage began to shift. A hidden compartment in the floor opened, revealing not gold, but a collection of microfilms and a second iron box, one that looked identical to the first. As the sirens began to wail in the valley below, I realized that the grandma's true story was only just beginning. The first 7 parts were about survival. Part 8 was about the truth. But as I opened the second iron box, I saw something that made me drop the journal. It was a birth certificate. Not for Chloe. Here is part 9 of the story. This chapter is a deep dive into the most shocking revelation yet, maintaining the length and intense dramatic atmosphere of part 2, designed to keep your audience on the edge of their seats. Part 9, The Shadow Twin. The chime of the 1,000 clocks slowly died down, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like it was pressing against our eardrums. Stephen lay unconscious on the floor, restrained by Arthur, but none of us were looking at him. Our eyes were locked on the yellow document I held in my shaking hands. A birth certificate. A twin. Mom. Chloe's voice was barely a whisper. She looked at the paper, then at me, her face ghostly white in the moonlight filtering through the cottage windows. A brother? I have a brother? Why didn't you tell me? Why did Henry keep this in a separate house? I couldn't speak. My mind was racing back 30 years, trying to find a memory I had suppressed, but there was nothing. I don't know, Chloe, I stammered. The night you were born was a blur of shadows and fear. We were running from the Vance family. Henry took the lead. He handled the hospital, the papers, everything. I thought there was only you. Arthur stood up, his face etched with a sudden horrifying realization. He grabbed the second iron box and began rifling through the microfilms. Eleanor, look at the hospital name on the certificate. It's not the city hospital. It's St. Jude's Sanctuary for Foundlings. It was a private, secretive facility owned by my father's conglomerate. He held a piece of microfilm up to the light of a desk lamp. It's all here. My father didn't just want to hide the scandal of a granddaughter. He wanted to secure a pure Vance heir. He bribed the doctors to tell you the boy didn't survive, Eleanor. He stole your son from the cradle and sent him away to be raised by people he controlled. Chloe collapsed into a chair, the weight of the betrayal finally breaking her. So all this time while I was being raised by you and Henry in a cottage, my brother was being raised as a pawn for the Vances? Where is he, Arthur? Who is he? Arthur scrolled through the digital records on the cottage's terminal, his fingers flying across the keys. The boy was given to a high-ranking Vance associate. His name was changed. He was groomed for years to take over the darker side of the family business. The side that managed the fixers. The side that managed Project Sunset. A cold dread began to pool in my stomach. I looked at the map on the wall, the lines of red ink, and the final entry in Henry's journal. The lion is at the door. Arthur, I said, my voice cold with fear. If this twin was raised to lead the fixers and Marcus was trying to blackmail the Vances using Project Sunset, that means Marcus wasn't just working with a lawyer. He was working with someone who knew the system from the inside. Suddenly, the silence of the woods was shattered by the sound of a heavy, low-humming engine. Not a police car. A high-performance luxury vehicle. We looked out the window and saw a single set of headlights approaching the cottage with terrifying speed. The door to the cottage didn't creak this time. It was kicked open with such force that the hinges screamed. A man stepped into the room. He was tall, dressed in a sharp charcoal gray suit, his hair perfectly coiffed. But it was his face that stopped our hearts. He looked exactly like Arthur did in the old photographs, but he had Chloe's eyes. Piercing, cold, and filled with a strange, calculating intelligence. The family reunion I never wanted, the man said. His voice a mirror image of Arthur's, but stripped of all warmth. Julian. Arthur whispered, the name escaping his lips like a prayer. Julian Vance? The name is Caleb now, the man replied, stepping into the light. He didn't look at Arthur. He didn't look at Chloe. He looked straight at me. And you must be the woman who gave me up. The brave Eleanor who saved one child and abandoned the other to a life of service to a monster. I didn't know. I cried out, the tears finally breaking through. They told me you were gone, Caleb. I would have died for you. And yet here we are, Caleb said, pulling a sleek black device from his pocket. It wasn't a gun. It was a digital transmitter. Marcus was a fool. He thought he could use my family's secrets to get rich. He didn't realize I am the secrets. I let him play his games because it led me to you. I needed to find where Henry hid the original sins. The microfilms that can destroy everything I've built. He looked at the second iron box on the table. Hand it over, Eleanor. I have a team of fixers 5 minutes away. If I give the word, this cottage and everyone in it becomes a footnote in history. Chloe stood up, her eyes flashing with a sudden fierce protectiveness. She stepped in front of me, facing the brother she had only just learned existed. You won't touch her, Caleb. You think you're the only one who can play this game? I already live-streamed the Blue Ledger. The world knows. You're not a kingmaker anymore. You're a fugitive. Caleb laughed, a dry, hollow sound. The Blue Ledger was the bait, sister. You leaked the small crimes to hide the big ones. But these microfilms, these contain the codes to the global accounts. If I have these, I don't need a name. I can buy a new one. He stepped closer, the transmitter in his hand blinking red. One last time. The box. Or the fixers finish what Marcus started. I looked at Caleb, my son, and then at the wall of clocks. I remembered Henry's final lesson. Time is a weapon if you know how to wind it. My hand crept toward the base of the desk, where a small hidden brass button was tucked into the carving. You're right, Caleb, I said, my voice suddenly calm. You were raised by a monster. But you were born of a walker. And walkers never give up their own. I pressed the button. The cottage didn't chime this time. Instead, a series of hidden magnets behind the wall of clocks activated, creating a powerful electromagnetic pulse. Caleb's transmitter sparked and died in his hand. The computer terminal fried with a pop of blue light. The microfilms, the digital ones, were wiped clean in an instant. What did you do? Caleb roared, lunging for the desk. I took away your leverage, I said. Now you're just a man in a suit with no backup, and a very long list of people who want to talk to you. And look. I pointed to the window. The real police, led by a helicopter searchlight, were finally descending into the valley. But as Caleb looked at the approaching lights, a strange smile crossed his face. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small old-fashioned pocket watch, the one Henry always wore. You think Henry was the only one who knew how to build a trap, Mother? Caleb whispered. This watch isn't just a timepiece. It's a key to a third location. And you're going to help me find it. Before Arthur could move, a flashbang grenade went off in the center of the room. By the time the smoke cleared, the second iron box was gone. And so was Caleb. The smoke from the flashbang grenade lingered in the cold air of the stone cottage, but Caleb, my long-lost son, was gone. He had vanished into the mist, taking the second iron box and Henry's silver pocket watch with him. Arthur stood by the window staring into the dark woods, while Chloe sat on the floor, her face buried in her hands. The weight of the night was enough to crush anyone, but as I looked at the empty space where the desk had been, I felt a strange surge of clarity. He hasn't won yet, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Caleb thinks he has the key to the third location, but he doesn't realize that Henry didn't just build clocks. He built puzzles. Arthur turned around, his eyes tired. Eleanor, he has the microfilms. He has the watch. He's headed for the final vault. By the time we find him, he'll have wiped the Vance name from existence and disappeared with billions. No, I replied, walking toward the grandfather clock that had been the center of the room. Henry always said, the most important time isn't the future or the past. It's the time you have right now. Chloe, look at the wall where the clocks were shattered. Chloe stood up, wiping her eyes. She looked at the wall where the electromagnetic pulse had fried the electronics. Among the broken glass and twisted metal, one small wooden gear remained spinning perfectly, unaffected by the magnets. It was a mechanical heart, hidden behind the digital facade. It's a compass, Chloe whispered, realizing the genius of her father. The gear isn't just spinning. It's pointing. We followed the direction of the gear. It didn't point toward the city or the estate. It pointed toward the old lighthouse on the cliffside, the place where Henry and I had first met 40 years ago.